Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
We have heard it all before. The 70s were a wild time that extended into the 80s and the 90s. For those of us who grew up in that time, we remember that life looked very different than what it does for our children today. I don't know that there was truly any less crime, but there was certainly less awareness of it. With the technology we have today, we can not only learn about what is happening locally, but from around the world in minutes. Social media makes it very easy for those of us who are there to witness things happening and to be able to spread it around the world. But just a few decades ago, that was very different. Going outside was done without being documented. The trails were hiked by friends, and when local secrets were located, it wasn't spread to the masses. But that also meant that if someone went missing, it was very easy to dismiss the silence as normal behavior. The ease with which we can contact each other today is not what we had even 15 years ago. The demand for someone to pick up the phone when we call or answer a text within a certain amount of time feels reckless and wrong. In the 70s and even into the early 2000s, the way to locate your friends was by finding their bikes in the front yard. It was to wait to call the house phone and to expect their parents to answer. And on occasion, it meant knocking on a door, finding it unlocked, and letting yourself into a home that you have called your second family. Silence was common, boredom was normal, and trips and vacations and events were passed around by words instead of the highlight reels of social media. It was a different time, and with that different time came a different set of skills. Skills that are not that far different than what we see today. Skills of stepping into the woods and reading the terrain, tracking a person, and piecing together the clues. Skills that when a dead end shows up, left the professionals scratching their heads, especially when it came to a teenage girl visiting the great outdoors. Welcome back to Tragedy with a View. Hello, and welcome back. I am your host, Kayla, and I have a few things before we really get into the story. I was informed about a program that involves a guy, but he is stealing creators' content, essentially posting it behind a paywall, and then using AI to strip the ads from those podcasts. And of course, I don't have ads in this podcast, something I'm exploring for in the future. But as of now, I'm still going to stand by my no ads policy. But apparently my podcast is still on there. So I'm not sure what he's getting out of that. But there are other content creators who do rely on those ads. And as any podcaster will tell you, you don't make a whole lot of money off of podcasting. You really don't make much money at all. And the very little that you do get is a little bit of the reward for the hours and hours and hours that you put into this work. And it is extremely frustrating for me that somebody is stealing our content to financially gain. So if anyone is aware of that happening out there and you see it happening, please let me know. And I will pass the word along to my friends and we will do the necessary things to get it shut down, because that's not appropriate. It's also not legal. And it's also very frustrating for me as a creator, because I'm putting so much effort and work into this, and someone's just taking it. I haven't really formulated words yet on it, but that is something that is happening, something I'm aware of. And if you as listeners find it happening anywhere else, I would love to be informed. And also mentioning with AI, just because it seems to be everywhere at this point, I want to make sure that you are aware that I do not use AI in any of my production or drafting or editing. AI is really not used for this podcast. Everything is done by me. And with that, sometimes mistakes are made, and I am human, and I'm happy to correct anything that I am wrong about. So if you find anything is inaccurate, please let me know. Again, let me know. And then I have two more things very quickly that you don't need to let me know anything about. But one, I joined Robin on her podcast. It was the first time that I really kind of did an interview style podcast. I was the one on the interviewee side. So Robin had me on her podcast. It is called I Can Do Anything Podcast. And we kind of connected over Facebook from a social media post that we both ended up commenting on about runner safety. And since I have the Girl Gone Running series, which will be launching the first Saturday of February, that's the first episode being released. We got talking about that, and she mentioned that she also had a podcast and she would love to talk to me. So I did that, and that episode was released a few weeks ago in December, and it was a great conversation. We talked about similarities with podcasting and how much time and effort that we put into it and where we find that time and the effort and the energy. And we also talked about, our own experiences with learning to trust your gut. And it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And if you want to go listen, I'm going to post it in the description of this podcast. So that way you can just go click on the link and go listen to that. And it's just a little bit more about me and kind of behind the scenes rather than just kind of getting into the story. And then, I guess that was actually the last thing that I had. I don't have anything else. Getting into the story, today we are going to a national park that makes the news regularly for its missing people, which begs the question, what is it about the Great Smoky Mountains National Park that causes people to go missing and never be found? Located on the border of Tennessee and North Carolina, Great Smoky Mountains is the most visited park in the United States. In 2023 and 2024, over 12 million people crossed into the park boundaries each year, and it has been the most visited national park since the 40s. So for 80 years, it has been the most visited national park. And in all actuality, this is nearly 3 times more visitors than the next most popular park, which is Zion, which in 2024 was Zion with just shy of 5 million visits. But it is not hard to see why. The park is beautiful, but part of the draw is the dark and the mysterious. The forest seems to be oddly still even when the sun is shining, and when poor weather rolls in, the land almost ignites with energy. The Smokies get its name thanks to the smoky blue fog that hangs around the mountains and the valleys. When the park was established in 1934, they actually had to buy out thousands of homes and farms in order to establish the 522,427 acres of land in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And prior to this, almost 80% of what we recognize as the park today was completely cut down due to logging. So what we see today is all relatively new growth. The mountains are somewhere between 270 million years old and more than 1 billion years old, depending on what part of the mountains you are looking at. But more specifically, the mountains that we walk on today when we go hiking deep within the park was formed due to a major collision of North America and Africa, which pushed the mountains up some 300 million years ago. Besides the 1,900 black bears living in the park, which makes it a hot spot for people to travel and see these incredible creatures, there are also 65 species of mammals, 200 species of birds, 67 native fish species, over 80 species of reptiles, 140 species of trees, and over 4,000 species of other plants. While nature itself offers plenty of reason to watch your step, the mysteries in the park have a draw unlike any other. The Cherokee legend speaks of Spearfinger, the shape-shifting witch that prowls through the mountains in search of livers from humans and animals to feast on. Lucy, the ghost that haunts Roaring Fork Trail and Cabin, can be heard whispering through the night as she searches for a young man. There are questions about why natives didn't settle in Cades Cove, an area that was rich and abundant with anything that they would need. And then there are the disappearances. The people who just vanished, like that of Teresa Lynn Gibson, also known as Trenny. Trenny's case, unlike the others, has some clues as to what happened, but unfortunately those clues lead to, more likely than any other option, foul play.
Ooh. Welcome to the Bell Witch Podcast, a show that covers the infamous legend of the historic Bell Witch haunting in southern United States in the 19th century, where the Bell family experienced frightening happenings within their home. Hang on a second. No, that's the wrong Bell Witch. This is a podcast about being a witchy pagan in the 21st century, airing bi-weekly, with different guests on each month sharing their pearls of wisdom and gems of knowledge from their very own witchy businesses. I call it a moot loot. Here we cover a wide range of pagan and witchcraft related topics, from sigils, spells and spirits to Reiki rituals and pagan parenting while camping in the Bell tent named Delilah. It's got nothing to do with the Bell Witch from the 19th century in Tennessee that scared people to death in a little townhouse, which may or may not be true. Pretty cool story, but yeah, it's the wrong Bell Witch. This Bell Witch podcast is brought to you by Swales, the friendly green witch from Leeds, UK. A northern witch with a strong Yorkshire accent, a love of all things weird, spooky, magical, and a smelly dragon named Dave. So tune in every 2 weeks for a sprinkling of Yorkshire magic. Listen to the Bell Witch podcast with me, Swales, a friendly green witch, wherever you get your podcasts.
In 1967, Trenny was 16 years old and lived at home with her parents, Robert and Hope Gibson, in Knoxville, Tennessee, along with her 3 other siblings, Robert Jr., who was her older brother, and then Tina and Miracle, who were younger sisters. Trenny was a junior at Bearden High School, and on October 8th, her class was going on a field trip to Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Trenny, along with 38 other students in her class, climbed onto the school bus at 9 a.m. and off they went. Trenny, like many high school girls, dressed cute, brushing her shoulder-length wavy brown hair and pulling on a blue blouse, along with a pastel blue striped sweater, blue jeans, and blue Adidas shoes. She was about 5 foot 3 inches tall and weighed 115 pounds. And she had brought a jacket with her, but when she got to school that morning, the weather was really rainy and they were expecting more rain throughout the day. And there was a buzz that the field trip was going to be canceled. And so she left her jacket behind in her mom's car. Trenny wasn't just a normal student. She knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life. She had big interest in plants, which prompted her to take a horticulture class in high school, as she planned to study landscape architecture in college, where she hoped to attend the University of Tennessee. In the summers and after school, Trenny had a job at the local mall where she worked part-time. She otherwise liked to hang out at home, but her home life was already kind of rumored to be on the strict side. The kids were required to go to church, and her parents discouraged smoking. Nothing about this is truly jumping out to me as anything more strict than normal, but we only know what information is portrayed to the public. From my point of view, it just looks like they're trying to instill good habits in their children. Wayne Dunlap, who was the horticulture teacher, was kind of new, and I'm not sure if he was new to teaching or just new to the school. But this was his first year at the high school, and he was excited to be getting outdoors during the class. He loved to be outside and hiking, as his horticulture focus might suggest. And when he arranged for this trip, he actually didn't tell any of the students where they were going. He kept it a surprise until they were on the bus and leaving the school. This is one of those situations that he would not be able to get away with today. Another thing that I am not sure he would be able to get away with today is that he was the only adult chaperone for this field trip. Truth be told, Trenny's mom, Hope, had actually volunteered, but when it turned out that her husband, Trenny's dad, had to go out of town for work, she didn't have any help that she needed for Miracle, who was a young child at this time, and she wasn't yet in school. So Robert Sr., Trenny's father, worked regularly out of the area, so it was not uncommon for him to be gone for weeks at a time. And during those times, it was left to Hope to be a single parent for her children. And even though she fully intended to help chaperone the kids on this field trip, she had to back out last minute. When Trenny learned that her mom would not be going with her on this field trip, she suddenly got a little bit apprehensive. But her parents were not so strict that they wanted their children to stay at home all the time, so they were really encouraging about her going and still having fun with her peers. When they arrived, they parked in the parking lot at Klingman's Dome, which is the tallest mountain in the Smokies, and Mr. Dunlap's plan was to take the students hiking along the Forney Ridge Trail that is 1.8 miles long, one direction. This is one of the most popular trails in the park, and the elevation change is most challenging right before you get to Andrews Bald, and the total elevation change in that one direction is about 1,200 feet. The trail starts with you being surrounded by towering pines and ends at Andrew Bald. It would be at Andrews Bald that Mr. Dunlap took a moment to remind everyone that they had to be back at the parking lot by 3:30 p.m., which meant that they needed to stay on the trail and not deviate, not explore. And in fact, this mountain, which is kind of an open grassy field at the very top, was a great place for them to look around, as it had plants that in the spring and summer produced a ton of different types of berries and flowers. Trenny spent the morning with a friend of her brother's who was a senior at the school. And this kid's name was Robert Simpson. So this was a friend of her brother, Robert Jr.'s, also named Robert. As they hiked, they talked, they ate lunch, but for their return hike, Robert and Trenny became separated when Robert thought that he was going to be able to track a bear and kind of stepped away to try to do that. But Trenny was not alone at this point. With her now was a small group of 3 other students, but it was her and Bobby Coghill who ended up being faster than the other 2. So this group of 4, Trenny and the 3 others, kind of separated into 2 groups of 2. Trenny, according to some others, was cold and tired of being in the rain, and she was just ready to go home and get out of the elements. As they hiked, they passed a couple of other slow-moving groups of students. One of these groups was actually stopped, and they kind of were off the trail just a little bit, and they invited Trenny to hang out with them, and she said no. She was going back to the bus. At 3 p.m., they were about half a mile from the parking lot, and as they hiked, they found the trail was steep and had a drop-off of one side. And anywhere that didn't have a drop-off, they noticed that the foliage was extremely thick. This is very common in the Great Smoky Mountains. The forests are even known for having to search over multiple times and still expecting to find things that they missed at a later date. Bobby decided at this point to stop and wait for the other 2 students behind them and just take a quick rest, but Trenny decided to keep going on her own. Bobby watched her as she hiked on, seeing her push ahead before stopping. Something to the right had caught her attention, and then he noticed that she turned in that direction and stepped off the trail, almost like she was going to investigate. And this is odd because, as we mentioned, she really wanted to get back to the bus. She was just done with being cold, so something had to have been really enticing to deviate her. When Bobby and the others finally made their way to the point they believed where Trenny had stepped off the trail, they didn't see her. All that was there was thick brush close to the ground and dark, dense trees. They kind of assumed that maybe she just needed to use the restroom and she stepped off the trail and ducked into some brush to do her business without being seen, which might have also explained her rush to get back to the bus because the parking lot was where there was a bathroom. Maybe she realized in the middle of all of this that she wasn't going to make it to the parking lot, so she just did what she needed to do. But when they returned to the parking lot some 40 minutes later, she wasn't there. Groups before them said that she hadn't caught up to them or passed them, and as groups came through behind them, they hadn't seen her either. Mr. Dunlap is doing a head count and then a roll call to determine if everyone is there, and it becomes glaringly obvious at this point that Trenny did not make it back to the parking lot. As word spread that she isn't there, groups of students and Mr. Dunlap start to do a quick search of the trails nearby. One of the students by the name of Danny volunteered to help, and he, along with a few others, do a quick jaunt back down the trail to check it, along with Andrews Bald, for any signs of Trenny. While they did this, Mr. Dunlap went down a side trail called Double Spring Trail, just in case she took a wrong turn at this point. When they find nothing, Wayne gets on the bus and uses the CB radio to call the National Park Service. A ranger arrived at about 4:30 along with 17 others from the Park Service and Jackson County Rescue. And then when they return with nothing to indicate where Trenny might be, he files an official report, which results in a search party being rounded up. In the meantime, Wayne coordinates to have the students taken back to the school while he stays with the rangers to help search for Trenny. Her parents, who didn't know that Trenny was missing until her mom was waiting in the parking lot to pick her up, also came to the park to search for Trenny. And at this point, it is worth mentioning that she had not dressed prepared to be outside for a long time. She was actually so chilly during the hike in and at lunch that she borrowed Robert's light jacket to wear, but still, it is October and the temperatures were falling. By the time the sun went down, it was raining heavily, winds were strong, and the temperatures dropped below freezing. But it still required some time to coordinate a search. And it wouldn't be until the next day that hundreds of people arrived for a full-scale search for Trenny. Roads and parking lots from Clingman's Dome to Newfound Gap Road were closed down so that way the search effort wouldn't have to deal with visitors or media. The Tennessee National Guard arrived to perform a search with helicopters, which unfortunately didn't provide a ton of feedback since the forest is just so dense. It was hard to see anything through the tops of the trees. Other students were questioned, and none of them had any information that was helpful, except for where she was seen stepping off of the trail, and the ground search itself was no easy task. Due to the heavy rains, trails were slick, and one of the searchers slipped and fell and broke a couple of their ribs. While the park was being searched, hospitals were called for any patients who might be Trenny. Even comparisons were being done to Jane Doe's in the morgue in an attempt to locate her. Theories began to pop up from the simple and plausible, the weather wasn't great and Trenny stepped off the trail and probably got lost. But it was the information that was collected that led to the potential of something a bit darker happening. In the area of the woods where she was noted to have left the trail, searchers found a beer can that had been opened and 3 cigarette butts. Along with that was what appeared to be a men's-sized shoe print in the mud. None of the other students, at least, admitted to having brought beer or cigarettes with them. Dogs were brought in to search for Trenny, some of which were owned by Trenny's uncles who were experienced in the outdoors and had hunting and tracking dogs, and they offered to help by bringing them in to search for her. They used some of Trenny's dirty clothes from back home to help give them a scent to find and follow, and interestingly, multiple of the dogs indicate that they picked up her scent at the intersection of Forney Ridge Trail, the trail that they were hiking that day, and where the Appalachian Trail met. All of them followed the scent to the base of the Kewohee Observation Tower, formerly known as Clingman's Dome Observation Tower, where it then entered back into the woods for more than a mile and a half until the scent trail ended at a paved road near the Newfound Gap mountain pass. The same location was about 8.5 miles from the parking lot that the bus was in. It should be noted that the scent trail was found on the second day of the search and then confirmed again on the third day. At this time, Dwight McCarter joined the search for Trenny. Now, Dwight is a local legend of search and rescue within the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. He has logged hundreds and hundreds of hours in searching and tracking missing people inside the park. And in the 115 search operations he participated in, he helped to locate the person in all but 2 cases. One of those cases was Dennis Martin, which is a story for another day, and the other is Trenny Gibson. In the location where Trenny's scent ended, 8 cigarette butts were found that were the same brand as the 3 that were previously found in the woods. And many began to wonder if the smoker or smokers of the cigarette were involved in her disappearance. No one knew Trenny to smoke, and while I do believe that teenagers can hide a lot of things, they're not so good at hiding smoking that sticks to your clothes and your skin. And further, I don't know if the cigarette butts were ever tested for DNA to see if they all came from the same person or not, because in my mind, had they been smoked by the same person, it would indicate that someone was waiting there on the road for a decent amount of time, showing that this wasn't just an impulse decision or abduction. Another theory that surfaced was that Trenny potentially ran away and had arranged for someone to meet her at the park to drive her out of there. But that would mean that she would have needed to know where they were going. And as we mentioned at the start, Mr. Dunlap didn't tell the students until they were on the bus. So there was no real way for her to be able to kind of arrange this without maybe having somebody follow the bus. But also, Mr. Dunlap mentions, and we're going to come to this in a minute, mentions that he didn't see anybody following them. And beyond that, it just seems like a lot of work to run away. But her parents don't believe this narrative anyways, especially because when Hope dropped her off at school in the morning, Trenny left her purse behind on purpose that had $200 in cash and antibiotics that she was on for a puncture wound that she had on her foot. 4 days of searching and finding little to go on, finally, the chief ranger announced that, based on the information they had, he was almost certain that Trenny was no longer in the park. But even though that was the lead they had to follow, they still didn't know if this was by choice, no matter how much her family insisted that it was not, or if this was more malicious. Because of this unknown and the potential for a kidnapping having occurred, the chief ranger then contacted the FBI to get them involved. When the FBI stepped in, they determined that if Trenny was kidnapped, the first point of contact would likely have been the intersection of the Appalachian Trail and Forney Ridge Trail, the same place where the scent dogs first picked up Trenny's scent. There was belief that the person or persons who kidnapped her coerced her into going with them to the base of the observation tower, where they then hid until the students had all shuffled out of the area. Then they forced her back through the woods to the road that the scent dogs lost her trail at, and it was here that she was placed in a vehicle and removed from the park. There is a similar theory, which includes a very similar trail of events, saying that instead, Trenny got lost with the foggy weather. As she wandered, she ended up finding herself on the road where someone then in a passing vehicle saw her and passed off, stopping to help as an opportunity to abduct her. Now, there's also some other things at play here. Trenny had a stalker. During the spring of 1967, Kelvin Bowman became interested in Trenny, but Trenny was not interested in him. He, though, really wanted to date her, and despite her constant rejections, Kelvin just didn't give up. But this effort changed from the adolescent's hyperfixation to Kelvin started hanging around Trenny's home. Then he started to bring a friend along, and this all came to a head when one night Trenny's mother, Hope, was home and she heard something outside. So he wasn't just sitting in his car on the street. He was actively going onto the property, maybe even looking in windows, like he was really stalking Trenny. So one night, Hope hears this noise. She grabs her gun, steps outside, aims it towards the noise, and pulls the trigger. I am not sure what the timeline of events was on Kelvin's side of things, but he was shot in the foot. This didn't deter him, though, because he then tried to actually break into the home. When he was caught by police, of course, he was sentenced to 2 years in a correctional facility, but only served 6 months. During this time that he was there were reports of him threatening to kill Trenny when he got out of jail. Upon his release, he was attending the same high school as Trenny, and other students reported that he was just constantly bullying her and trying to make her life a living hell. To boot, some students say that they saw Kelvin's car following the bus as it was leaving that morning. That being said, again, Mr. Dunlap said that he hadn't noticed any vehicles following them for the entire 50-mile trip, which took them an hour and a half to get from the school to the park. And even more, Kelvin was at the school and in all of his classes the entire day. Then we also have some drama with Robert Simpson, the same Robert who Trenny sat with on the bus and started hiking with and borrowed a jacket from. Robert was also interested in Trenny, but according to Trenny's friend, she didn't have the same feelings back. Suspicions rose about Robert when the comb that Trenny carried everywhere with her was seen in Robert's car. And this is the same comb that her mother remembers seeing being tucked into the front right pocket of Trenny's jeans when she left that morning. Some of Robert's stories and responses that were given to police when he was questioned don't make the most sense, but also on the more unfortunate side, his father was a very well-known lawyer, and when Robert was questioned locally by officers who knew his father, they didn't really press any issues, especially when his dad showed up and was like, "That's it, interview's over." Further, some of the jewelry that Trenny really loved was seen being worn by another student. So both the comb and her jewelry, Trenny took good care of. So it was odd that it was just kind of handed off to others. And while this might not seem like a lot, some people question why he wasn't looked at more. And honestly, in my opinion, Robert is kind of a big red flag here. But to play devil's advocate, if she really was intending to leave, if she was looking to run away, maybe she decided to leave some of her belongings behind and in the hands of someone she knew wouldn't just throw it away. There was the potential that she tripped and fell from a cliff, or maybe she was attacked by a bear. It was cold and rainy, and Trenny could have succumbed to hypothermia. These more natural storylines don't have enough to support them, especially when we look at the dogs having a definitive start and end marks for her scent, both different dogs on different days. This seems to be the least plausible due to the dogs, but it is not something to completely dismiss either. And in all honesty, the truth could hold a few elements from all of the theories. Maybe she did have to pee and go step off the trail, and maybe when she returned to the trail, there were no other students nearby. Maybe when she met at the intersection of the trail, she found someone who then abducted her. The truth is unknown and may be simple and straightforward or extremely complex. Because when a person goes missing in the forest, they are here one moment and gone the next. And it is the unknown that results in many people's mind beginning to wander, to consider worst case scenario, as well as the potential that something easier to think about happened. All through October, the park was searched until it was called off on November 1st. The following spring, 230 volunteers returned to the park to search for Trenny, organized by her father. But again, nothing was ever found. And honestly, searching for a person for an entire month when you announce that you don't think they're in the park anymore is extremely surprising to me. The effect of Trenny's disappearance didn't just affect Trenny, the school, the park, her classmates, and her family. Everyone saw changes due to this. Trenny's parents became super strict with her siblings and what they could or couldn't do. Her family blamed each other for what happened and the lack of answers, and Trenny's parents would end up getting divorced. The school made changes to its processes, and some of the students who had close connections to Trenny were blamed by other students, and we all know that our classmates can be the worst bullies. It was October 8th when Trenny stepped onto the popular trail and vanished. Without a doubt, her family has spent decades, almost 50 years, searching for answers, wondering what happened to their little girl, their sister. It is situations like these where answers are just lost. Confirmation is not guaranteed, and the truth seems to linger like it is just out of grasp. The majority of this information came from two separate sources with quite a bit of Googling for updates or more defined information. Those two sources are CanadianGirl77.com, who has a blog and she does a really deep dive on the disappearance of Trenny. And the other is a book that I somehow picked up in Idaho called National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and it is by Stephen Stockton. Other sources include medium.com, missingkids.org, National Geographic, and the New York Times. As always, everyone, thank you so much for listening. We will talk again next week. Have a great day. Bye. What is life without close calls with disaster? Thank you for listening. Don't forget to follow the podcast to be the first to hear the now weekly episodes. Join our subscription on Patreon, Apple, or Spotify today and immerse yourself in the haunting beauty of the great outdoors. For around $4 a month, you'll get exclusive access to the first episode of each month and early access to all other episodes, showcasing the morbid and mysterious side of nature. Please reach out with story requests, and if you have your own story, please email tragedywithaview@gmail.com for a chance to have your story featured on a later episode. Again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.